Most private lenders assume the borrower will refinance at the end of the term. That's their exit plan. But what if I told you the bank wasn't coming? In this video, I'm going to show you how to spot the 4 signs that a refinance isn't going to happen and what to do instead so you don't end up stuck at the end. I'm Chris Nichilo, founder of Magnetic Capital Group and The Wealthy Lender. Now, since 2019, I've helped investors fund over $110 million into private mortgages across Ontario. And one of the biggest mistakes I see, especially with new lenders, they structure every deal as if a refinance is a sure thing, but it's not automatic. And if you assume it is, you're setting yourself up for trouble. Debt ratios, credit scores, appraised values, documentation, these are real barriers. And if you miss the signs, you will pay for it later. In this video, I'll walk you through the 4 key signs the bank won't be your exit strategy. Then I'll show you how to structure a backup plan, like a sale, so you still win, even when the refinance with a bank doesn't happen. The number one reason a bank refinance falls apart, the debt service ratios still don't work 12 months from now. Banks don't care that you helped clean up credit. They don't care that collections were paid off or debts were consolidated. They care about one thing. Can the borrower qualify on paper? If their gross debt service, GDS, and total debt service, TDS, ratios are still too high when it comes time to go back to the bank, the deal is dead on arrival. And it's easy to foresee. And here's the tricky part. Not all banks calculate ratios the same way. Some use a percentage of every revolving credit balance, like 3% of the balance, even if the real minimum payment is lower. That means a $10,000 credit card with a $50 minimum payment might still be counted as $300 a month in the ratios for a refinance application. Meanwhile, a $10,000 car loan might cost $700 a month, even though the balance is the same. So if you're consolidating, which one do you pay off? Most people would say the credit card because it hurts the credit score more to carry a high balance on a credit card. But from a debt ratio standpoint, paying off the car loan gives you more breathing room. That's why you can't just throw money at the loudest problem. You have to ask questions like, what's the actual monthly impact on GDS and TDS to the way I use the funds? What will the bank use for calculations? And am I using my loan proceeds in a way that genuinely helps support the exit? If your loan doesn't get those ratios back in line, don't count on a refinance with a bank. You're not setting the borrower up for success. You're setting up a rerun with yourself. The second sign the bank may not be your exit is that the borrower is basing their plans on market value, not appraised value of their property. See, most borrowers and even some brokers don't understand the difference. Market value is what a realtor thinks the property could sell for, and they may be right. But appraised value is what a lender's appraiser is willing to put in writing, based strictly on the past closed comparable sales. They're not the same thing. And in today's market, that gap can be very big. Realtors price forward using momentum, listings, and buyer activities. But appraisers look backward. They rely on 90-day sales data. So if the best comps are older, lower, or from a soft patch in the market, that's what's going to show up on paper. And remember, appraisers work for the banks, not for the borrowers. If they inflate a value and the deal goes bad, they may be liable. So they err on the side of caution, always. I've seen it too many times. A borrower swears their home is worth $950,000 because their neighbors just listed at $999. But the appraisal lands at $875 because the last 3 closed sales were under $900,000 and 2 were in worse shape. Now the refinance falls apart, and that's where private lenders get trapped. We lend based on the borrower's belief in the market value. But when it's time to exit, the bank lends based on the appraiser's report. And here's the kicker. Unless the borrower qualifies for an insured mortgage, banks cap their LTV at 80%. So if you lend right up to 80% based on today's best case value, and even a small dip in value occurs, the borrower may not be able to pay you out even if they qualify. That's why it's our job to think ahead. Before you fund the deal, ask yourself these questions. If this were being refinanced in 12 months, what value would the appraiser likely use? Will 80% of that number be enough to pay me out? If the answer is no, then the refinance probably isn't an exit, it's a gamble. And you're the one that's going to probably be left holding the bag. The third side the bank won't be your exit, the borrower's credit score won't recover fast enough. Now, everyone loves a comeback story, but banks don't lend on potential, they lend on score. And that score, it's judged by a machine. Most bank approvals are done through automated decisioning systems. No human underwriter, no context, no room for nuance. If the credit score isn't high enough, typically above 600 and often closer to 660 or 680, it's an automatic no. In the private world, we can look deeper. We can see patterns, ask questions, understand when the trouble started and how the borrower's behavior has changed. But the bank's algorithm doesn't care. It sees the score and it makes a decision. That's why your exit strategy needs to factor in more than just they're getting back on track. You need to know things like what actually improves a credit score quickly, what won't help as much as people think. For example, paying off credit cards below 30% of their limit, big impact. Removing collections, important, but only if they're fully settled and recent. Settling old accounts for less than owed may help the balance sheet, but often barely moves the score. As a lender, you don't need to be a credit expert, but you do need a working knowledge of how scores are built. That way you can design your loan and the use of funds to create the biggest impact. Want great free resources to learn more? You can go to Equifax's Canada Credit Score Education or Borrowell's breakdowns on score factors. There'll be links in the description below. And before you fund, need to ask yourself this: is this borrower really going to hit that bankable score in 12 months? Or am I assuming a best case scenario in a rigid system that doesn't reward nuance? If the credit score can't cross the threshold in time, there is no refinance, just rollover, renewal, or default. Now, hope doesn't raise credit scores, action does, and you need to build that into your loan from day one. The fourth sign the bank won't be your exit: there's no experienced broker guiding the borrower. Now, this is the piece most private lenders overlook, but it matters a lot in my opinion. Refinancing into a bank isn't easy. It takes strategy, timing, paperwork, and knowing exactly what the lender wants to see, especially since you're coming from private. And if the borrower's planning to handle it themselves, they're almost always underestimating the challenge. Now, a great mortgage broker doesn't just fill out a loan application, they map the exit. They coach the borrower through credit recovery. They stage the refinance in phases. They talk to the bank ahead of time to identify any deal breakers, and they help structure the deal so the exit is actually possible. Now, without that guidance, most borrowers drift. They don't know what documentation to save. They forget to check how their new job status affects qualification. They miss key timelines, and by the time the loan matures, they're no closer to a bank refinance than the day you funded a loan for them. So, before you advance funds, ask things like who's helping the borrower plans the exit? And is it someone experienced and proactive, or just someone who submitted the original application and disappeared? Is there a real refinance strategy in motion, or just vague optimism? If there's no broker involved, or worse, if the borrower thinks they don't need one, you're not lending into a plan, you're lending into some form of chaos. No broker, no blueprint. And without a blueprint, don't expect the bank to show up with bricks. Private lending isn't about optimism, it's about alignment. And once you learn how to spot the red flags early, you can stop chasing exits and start engineering them. If you want to sharpen your skills, learn how real pros underwrite deals, and connect with other serious private lenders, join my free school community, The Wealthy Lender's Brain. You'll get access to weekly live Q&A sessions. You can post your questions anytime, and you'll be surrounded by a growing community of people just like you who are all learning, sharing, and leveling up together. There's no fluff, just clarity, strategy, and support. Click the link in the description below and join us. So what do you do when you've gone through all four signs and realize the bank won't be your exit, or may not be? Do you kill the deal? Not necessarily, because in private lending, the refinance isn't the only path out. A sale is always an option if the deal is structured right. That's why your loan to value really matters. If you keep it under 80, you preserve the ability to sell and repay the loan even if the refinance doesn't materialize. But here's the key. You need to get the borrower on the same page with you about this before you fund, because it's basically a pivot strategy. So I'll often say to the borrower, you have 9 months to refinance, let's agree, and to support that, I'll reduce your prepayment penalty to 1 month instead of 3, so that if you can refinance, you get out easily. But if there's no commitment from a bank by the end of month 9, then we're going to both agree now that you'll list the property for sale then, and we'll still have 90 days to sell. If the borrower's on the same page with me, then we'll have a conversation about who the realtor will be, how the listing will be priced, and especially what the minimum offer is that they would agree to accept, because that helps avoid a scenario where the best offer available is enough to pay off the mortgage, but it's not as much as the borrower had hoped for, and they want to hold out just in case a better offer materializes. That's not just a good faith gesture, that's exit planning. It sets expectations clearly, it preserves dignity, and it protects your capital. But if the borrower pushes back, if they say, I'll refinance, don't worry, and they refuse to talk about a plan B, then you should walk. Because now you're not just hoping for repayment, you're relying on someone who doesn't want to face the numbers or maybe the facts, and you can't lend into a fantasy. That's where a lot of lenders get into trouble. They convince themselves that if they just believe in the borrower, things will work out. But private lending isn't about belief, it's about alignment. And if the borrower understands that refinance is the goal, but sale is the backup, and if they're willing to commit to both timelines, then you've got a file that can work. But if they're emotionally attached to the property, or resistant to facing reality, or convinced that something will come together, then the real answer is already clear. And saying no at that point isn't cold, it's just smart. It saves you both from conflict later. So, it's just the way to go. Now let's be clear. If a refinance isn't likely, and you don't have a committed sales strategy in place, the deal doesn't work. Not for you, not for the borrower. But if you stay under 80%, structure a 9-month refinance window, and set clear expectations for a sale at month 10 if needed, now you're lending with leverage and not with hope. And that's what separates the amateurs from the professionals, because in this business, funding the deal isn't the goal, getting out clean is. So, if this helps sharpen your thinking, hit the like button below, maybe drop a comment with your favorite deal structure trick, or share this video with someone who still thinks that every loan ends in a refinance. Until next time, say no often, say yes wisely, and always plan your exit before you enter. Happy lending.